The next fly is an interesting pattern with a mature rating, right? The mature damsel nymph. What's the difference in an immature damsel nymph? Just
so
whines too much?
Yeah. What we're imitating here, Jack, is the fully developed damselfly nymph as they swim off the bottom, get to within about 3 feet of the surface, and then migrate, swim horizontally to some long stem bulrush or cattails to emerge as the adult insect. And they do this en masse. And so this is the fully developed or mature nymph, and trout really do key on them.
And you're going to have some flotation in this, obviously.
Well, I don't put any flotation in this particular pattern, but we're using it in combination with a floating line.
Oh, okay. So it's close to the surface.
It's close to the surface.
That's well. I'm anxious to see this because I'm a big damselfly fan because I've fished them. I've actually fished more lakes with damselflies outside of the U.S. in Australia and New Zealand than I ever did here.
And there, and I understand it, there's a good populations down there.
Oh, huge. They call them mud eyes down there.
And the trout love them.
And I like that name though. Then mud eye, you know, sort of like whoa. All right, mature damselfly nymph.
Trout love to eat mature damselfly nymphs. By that I mean nymphs that have fully developed, are swimming off the bottom of the shoal or the littoral zone up to within 3 feet of the surface of the lake, and then swimming horizontally till they reach some long stem bulrush or cattail to crawl up out of the water, dry their shucks, and allow the adult to crawl out. So it's completing the life cycle from the nymph to the adult. As anglers, we know when there's a mass emergence of damselfly nymphs because we can see them swimming sinusoidally through the water. I'm going to tie a mature damselfly nymph using marabou as the body and tail, and then some pheasant tail for the shellback and legs. A very effective pattern, simple to tie. When trout are on those damselfly nymphs that are migrating, you need a go-to pattern. This is the one that I use. So I'll start off with a number 8 3X long shanked hook. I've got 8/0 light olive tying thread. For the body of the fly, I'm going to be using the Stillwater Solutions strung marabou in olive dun in coloration. For the shellback and the legs of the fly, I'm going to be using the light olive dyed pheasant tail from Stillwater Solutions. Take my tying thread, form a base down the shank of the hook. Rib of this fly is going to be regular copper wire, fine copper wire in the regular, not in red coloration, just in regular copper wire. So tie that in. And then we're going to take our strung marabou, and we want to use strung marabou versus woolly bugger marabou because we need the longer fibers of the marabou because we're going to spin it and to twist, spin and twist the body to make the body. So marabou like so, and allow some for the tail. That, and I need a bit more material. Yeah, so I'm going to take in total about ½ an inch of marabou when you pull it off the stem. And remember, the marabou, when it's wet, when it lays down and wet, it's going to be a lot thinner. The tail should be about 3/4 of the length of the shank of the hook, about that long. So now I've got the tail tied in. I'm going to take the marabou and I'm just going to grab it by the butts and twist it, spin it, your hand, and then I'm just going to wind it forward and retwist it to make sure it stays tight. We want the marabou fibers to stand out because the reason why we're using the marabou is that when this fly is moving through the water, the marabou pulses. And that'll look really great when it's going through the water. So I've tied that off. So I'm just going to take my rib now. And I'm just going to carefully wind it through, kind of wiggle it as I wind it through the marabou fibers that are now standing out. So I don't want to mat them down too much. Tie that off. So. And now we're going to take our dyed light olive pheasant tail. We're going to cut off 3 or 4 fibers for the legs on one side of the fly. So I'm going to take the fiber, I'm going to just lay it down the side of the fly. Tie them in so that they stand out on an angle. And then I'm going to take the same 3 or 4 fibers for the other side of the fly to create the legs. So they'll be on the other side, like so. Tie them in. So now we got the legs out both sides. And then I'm just going to take my tying thread and carry on forward, tying down the rest of the pheasant tail, because it's going to form the shell back on the finished fly. And then I'm going to take some mottled bee chain that's been mottled, painted an olivey green in coloration. So cut 2 eyes off, and I'm just going to lash them in right behind the eye of the hook. So figure 8 them in so they're in there. Okay, so we got the eyes. And then I'm just going to take a little bit more marabou to finish the head of the fly off. And this time I'm going to tie the marabou fibers in by the tips. So they're tied in, and then I'm just going to twist them again. So to make it easier to twist them, to grab them, you should wet your fingers, your thumb and your index finger, and that'll give you a better grip on it. And you're twisting by the butts, so you're trying not to damage the hackles, and I'm kind of weaving it in and out a bit between the eyes. So, and then tying it off. And then we're just going to take the tag end or the butt ends of the pheasant tail, pull them back between the eyes. So, tie it off. That forms the head and the shell back, and then I'm going to leave about just under 1/8 of an inch in length to further extend the shell back, to give it a more prominent appearance. One thing about the migrating mature damselfly nymphs is that their wing pads get very swollen as they get ready to burst out into the adult. And so by leaving this 1/4 inch piece of pheasant tail out, it just gives the appearance of the swollen wing pads. And the beauty again of using marabou is that it pulses, breathes through the water, and like more natural, more lifelike. So I finish the fly off with a whip finisher. Just make sure everything's good on the tail, right length. Now fishing this fly, because of the mature nymphs are so high in the water column, this is a floating line situation. Floating line, 12 to 14 foot leader, tying this fly on. Great to use a loop knot again, because the fly is going to undulate up and down in the water. And those fish will look up and see the nymphs as they're swimming horizontally through the water column. Lots of evidence of hatches occurring or emergencies occurring because you see them swimming in the water. Or if you're anchored there, you look at your anchor rope as you're pulling it up to move, and 4 or 5 nymphs fall off your anchor rope. Well, they've crawled up your anchor rope to emerge, and so that should put the light bulb on up in the brain there to tell you what's going on. So here's a nice slender swimming mature damselfly nymph. trout love to eat damselfly nymphs, whether it's the immature stages of the nymph or the mature damselfly nymph. Mature damselfly nymphs, those are nymphs that are fully developed, swim off the bottom of the lake, off the shoulder of the liver zone in shallow water, and they swim up to about 3 feet below the surface of the lake. Then they swim towards shore or towards some emergent vegetation like this grass that's growing here. The nymphs crawl up out of the water onto the grass. So this is a perfect situation where I am right now. I'm using a slow, clear, intermediate sinking line, and I'm just fishing a damselfly nymph as it would imitate it swimming towards the grass to emerge. So I'm just using a nice continuous hand strip retrieve, not too fast, and then always interspersing 2 or 3 quick pulls just to add a little bit of different action to the fly. So the nymph is swimming, I'm retrieving the fly in the direction that the real nymphs would be swimming. Nice continuous hand strip retrieve. So, and then the odd quick pull. Okay. Now, when you're out on the water, you'll know that there's damselflies migrating because you'll see the nymphs in the water, and they'll be swimming sinusoidally, and you want to make sure you figure out which direction they're swimming because you want to be casting the same direction where you're casting out and then retrieving your fly in the same direction that the real nymphs are swimming.